32 days down, the 3G bidding frenzy is still on. 4 rounds were concluded today. The government now stands to gain over 65,000 crores. So will the bids be sustainable? VINOD NAIR from Diamond Consultants, our very own Siddharth Zarabi is standing by, and we're hoping when this is going to end. Siddharth, take us through the numbers first.
Well, let's try and look at it this way. Over the last 8 days, the pace of daily increases in the bid amount has been declining. Around 8 days back, the daily average had increased by 6.5%, and today's number is at 2.2%. So this is the clearest indication so far that the pace of increase is declining, and therefore we can conclude that the auction has been is virtually about to end. But that's been said for so many days. Let us look at another piece of data which shows what is the picture. On Saturday, the number of negative circles where demand was less than the supply was 11. Today, that has declined by 1. The number of circles that had seen equal demand has remained at 7 and 8. Positive circles at 4. But the key thing here is the shift in the demand pattern. From Group A circles, the top 7 circles, including Delhi, Bombay, which together account for almost 12,500 crore of the 16,164 crore All India 3G license price, that has been shifting. We have seen Category C circles see excess demand also in some cases, as well as equalization of demand. Bihar, a very interesting case in this, a bid which has reached 185 circles. Bihar was dead for almost 15-20 days in terms of bidding activity. Look at the numbers further. You will clearly see a pattern that the operators seem to have decided and fixed whatever they wanted to do in the Group A circles, have moved their attention to Group C circles along with other circles that fall in between. But that means that because of the high base, both Delhi and Bombay have crossed 3,000 crores. So in fact, the two circles together account for almost 6,300, 400 odd crore. And if you do that in dollar terms, we have already crossed a 3.5 billion mark for the All India 3G license, 3.6 billion to be exact. And All India revenues from 3G alone in dollar terms at the current exchange rate, $14.5 billion. So clearly the numbers going up, but yes, there is a very clear-cut hint as well as evidence from data that we are actually in the last legs, perhaps a day, 2 or 3 days more, but I think this week will perhaps be the last week for the 3G bids, then we move into WiMAX.
All right, we know the mind boggles listening to those numbers now. Crossing 65,000 crores, that's the government revenue, and crossing 16,000 crores, that's the All India bid price. What do you make of the data that we have now got at the end of day 32? Siddharth was pointing out at some trends and some patterns that have emerged. What do you make of it?
Well, Shireen, the overall numbers are staggering. I think these numbers are higher than I think what most people had estimated. What you're seeing now is, not surprisingly, a focus now on some of the Class B and Class C circles. The way the auction is structured, as operators realize that either the metros or some of the Class A circles are beyond their reach, they have the option now to focus on some of the Class B and Class C circles. And not surprisingly, some of those circles had witnessed basically no action at all for 15-20 days, and now people are starting to look at those circles. I think it's just the spreading out of options by the operators as they realize that certain circles which are very high up on their desired list may not be circles that they can afford anymore.
You know, as this winds down, we are clearly seeing this shift in demand. The way this auction has been structured, do you expect a similar sort of pattern emerging when broadband wireless also goes in?
Broadband wireless is a different story, Ashraf, for many reasons. Remember, the key driving factor for these high valuations of spectrum on the 3G side is the scarcity of spectrum, scarcity of 2G spectrum. You will see a different format play out in the BWA auctions. BWA is attractive for what's essentially seen as the broadband data story in India. There are some people who have some concerns about the viability of some of the technologies, but you will see people who either have a very clear broadband data type focus, or new players who've not been participating in the 3G spectrum auction enter the BWA market. But the numbers are not going to be as steep. The business case is not as attractive as it is for basic 3G spectrum.
Vinod, let's come back to the 3G data that we are seeing. Given what you see so far, given the shift in demand, and like you said that some operators may be now concluding that certain circles that were high up on their list are no longer viable for them, are we going to see more than fragmentation in the number of winners instead of 3 clear-cut all India winners? Can we see 4 or 5 with smaller 7, 8 circles between them? Is that a sort of expectation that you would agree with?
Yes, that is a likelihood. I think the cost of a pan-India license has just gone up and up and up, which means that there are certain operators who now will have to take a regional bet rather than a pan-India bet. There'll be operators who will look at specific circles, either because they happen to be incumbents in those circles, which typically would be very sought after for them, for their business cases. There may be others who may decide that I may try a regional footprint for 3G and not necessarily compete for a national footprint. But yes, the answer is that instead of 3 clear-cut winners, you may see certain players saying, I would rather focus on a few circles and then wait for subsequent opportunities in future to expand my national footprint.
So do you think Bharti or Vodafone will be amongst those who decide to step back and sort of live to fight another day?
Difficult for us to comment about specific operators, but the fact is that the leading operators will still try and get a national footprint. There are clear reasons to aim for a national footprint. But even the leading operators, I'm sure at a certain point, will have to take a hard look at the economics involved of a national pan-India 3G license. I think the costs are becoming very steep for anyone who aspires for a pan-India license.
Siddharth, I actually have a question for you. If and when this auction really winds down tomorrow as expected, what are we expecting to hear? Will we hear individual operators who won individual bids, or what is the kind of information that we are likely to hear?
Well, what we had heard about the way the auction close was announced was only once, almost 45 days back. And at that stage, we were told that the Department of Telecom will announce the winners. And this will be a provisional announcement pending them paying up the dues in the manner that has been suggested. And I expect, and I've been speaking to some of the industry people, that there might be short statements from some of these individual companies with regard to how they have performed. However, in terms of when that exactly will happen, the question remains at this point of time is, will these operators come out and go ahead and give the details of the funding pattern? I think that is what the entire market will be really looking for, is to how the operators will fund this. So let's take Aircel for instance. If it were to win, we know that it has contracted $950 million via the ECB route. So similarly, what will companies do in terms of domestic borrowing as well as overseas borrowing? That will be the big question, but I don't think that will be answered right away as the DOT announces the list of provisional winners.
All right, so we'll leave it there. Many thanks for joining in as well. Coming up.